This is Greg Strange at the Institute of Directors, and with me is the IoD's Chief Economist, Graeme Leach. The subject today, the economy. Here we are. It has been a very tough year, but most of us at least are still here. What's the prospects for 2010?
Three words, I think, for the economy in 2010. Uncertainty, uncertainty, uncertainty. If we look at the economy, we've had a very abnormal recession. It's been very different to previous recessions in the post-war period, and I think we're almost certain as a result to have a very abnormal recovery as well. Now, the pre-budget report's behind us. The Chancellor's seen quite a bounce back there. He's seen a sort of classic V-shape almost, but we think it's going to be somewhat different to that. We think there's an equal probability between one hell of a recovery, in other words, an L-shaped recovery with not zero growth quarter on quarter, but very weak quarter on quarter growth. So between an L-shaped recovery or a double dip or even a triple tumble scenario. Now, the L-shaped scenario, the double dip scenario, and the triple tumble scenario, they really turn on three factors. They turn on what's happening to money supply growth, the nature of the fiscal tightening we introduce, and also the scale to which there's a balance sheet recession where households, companies focus on debt minimization and put everything else aside. And so if you look at the economy, we think there's real risk of a double dip scenario. And how do you get from a double dip to a triple tumble? Well, that's really primarily a case where the fiscal tightening comes in 2011. We know there's going to be a big tightening after the election, but it probably won't impact fully until 2011. So we see a scenario there with the triple tumble, which just extends a double dip, and a double dip is when you really get significant balance sheet adjustment, where the corporate sector still wants to cut its cost base. It wants to deleverage and shrink the balance sheet. And the household sector as well, they want to do that. They want to increase the savings ratio significantly. Still a lot of scope there for a rising savings ratio, which is going to squeeze consumer spending. And so all in all, the IoD is quite cautious out there. In fact, you would probably say that our forecasts are the most pessimistic out there in the marketplace of ideas at the moment. We're looking at, we still think only 0.5% growth in 2010 and probably about only 1.5% in 2011. So it's going to feel very, very tough out there for a long time to come.
Is the uncertainty all economic, or is there a political factor as well? We've got to have an election at some stage.
We have. At the moment, there are three levels of uncertainty. There's a normal background uncertainty, which we cope with all the time. On top of that, you've got specific uncertainty because of the financial crisis and the fact that that impacts on the economy in different ways. The banking system's impaired, for example. So you've got this added financial crisis uncertainty. And then, lo and behold, on top of that as well, you've got political uncertainty. We've got to have a general election, as you say, before June this year, and that adds another uncertainty. It increases the incentive to postpone a decision. Why make a decision today that may prove dangerous when you can just delay a little bit longer and you may be able to make the right decision? Uncertainty is a bit like deflation. Deflation is where you don't spend today because it's cheaper tomorrow. And economic uncertainty and political uncertainty works in the same way.
Now, who's in charge? Who's actually leading us out of this recession at the moment? Because the big weapon always used to be interest rates, but they've stayed unchanged for month after month after month. Who's in charge?
Well, I don't think the Chancellor's in charge in that sense, because fiscal policy is really parked until after the election. Somebody called QE, quantitative easing. Money supply growth is very weak still. Quantitative easing has prevented something much, much worse. It would have been Armageddon out there in the economy if we hadn't had quantitative easing. But what it's not done is expanded the money supply sufficiently yet to be confident we can get a sustained recovery. Money supply growth is still around 2 or 3%. It needs to be double that for us to be confident we're out of the woods in terms of recovery. And even then it could slip back. So big uncertainty there, primarily because of quantitative easing. But it's the only tool in town at the moment. It's the only option we've got.